This video is sponsored by Connell Guides. To get your hands on the most intelligent study guides on the market for GCSE and A-level English literature, as well as GCSE and A-level history, visit connellguides.com and use code RS15 at checkout for 15% off your order.
Which annotations could we make for Act 3, Scene 3 of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet? Let's find out.
What's occurring, Revision Squad? DystopiaJunkie here with another GCSE English Literature video for you. And in this one, we are going to annotate Act 3, Scene 3 of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, which I have nicknamed the Banishment reaction because it mostly centres on Romeo's reaction to finding out that he has been banished for killing Tybalt. As I annotate this scene, I'm going to focus on how it helps to create certain impressions about the play's characters, how it relates to the play's themes, and how it formally works as a piece of drama. As with my other annotation videos, I strongly suggest that you have a copy of the play in front of you, at least 3 different highlighters, and a pen to make notes with. This is the 6th of 8 annotation videos I have planned to make for Romeo and Juliet. If this video helps you out, please do let me know. You could do that by dropping this video a like, leaving a comment on it for me to read, sharing the video around with anybody else who might benefit from watching it, and you could of course subscribe to my channel too if you haven't done so already. Alright then, let's get stuck into annotating that scene. So as I said in the video introduction, I'm going to be making annotations that relate to the play's characters, themes and form. In these annotation videos, when I say form, I mean how this extract functions as a piece of drama. That means I will focus on the extract's relation to the overall structure of the play, whether it uses any dramatic devices, what audience responses might be, and so on. Moreover, some annotations might relate to more than one category, so if you see something that is shaded in both blue and green, for example, that is your cue to know that its comment is about how the extract relates to the play's characters and themes. So, Act 3, Scene 3 takes place at the room in which Friar Lawrence lives. Both he and Romeo are there, which suggests that Romeo has run there following his murder of Tybalt. Crucially, Romeo does not yet know that he has been banished when this scene starts. Now the first thing that stands out to me is Friar Lawrence's line, "Thou art wedded to calamity," given that it generates dramatic irony because its association of Romeo's marriage and disaster foreshadows the play's end. The dramatic irony reinforces the impression that the play's conclusion is predetermined, which of course relates to the theme of fate. Moreover, because it is Friar Lawrence who makes this assertion, we get the impression that he is a wise or prophetic character. Next, my attention is drawn to Romeo's repeated questions. To me, they suggest that he is begging Friar Lawrence for information, which not only suggests that Romeo looks up to Friar Lawrence as an authority figure, but that he feels powerless in this situation because he does not know what is happening. Last, we get the impression that Friar Lawrence is kind and paternalistic towards Romeo. Dear Son suggests that Friar Lawrence feels affection for Romeo, whereas his attempt to soothe Romeo's worries by telling him of the gentler punishment dished out by the prince reveals that he is kind and wants the young man to not worry about being executed. Romeo's reaction to finding out that his punishment is banishment rather than execution is quite unexpected though, for his exclamation, his insistence that the friar is merciful, and his expression that exile has more terror than death, makes it clear that Romeo would prefer death to banishment. This could imply that Romeo is addled by guilt for murdering Tybalt, because it is clear that he is not in his right mind. I mean, who would prefer death over exile, after all? In his subsequent dialogue, we get the impression that Romeo's distress relates directly to his love for his home, which he describes in hyperbolic terms, equating it to the world itself and everything outside of Verona's walls as being hell. Not only does this reinforce the over-the-top, dramatic impression we get of him when he states that he would prefer death to banishment, but it might also suggest that Romeo is quite immature or inexperienced, given that he naively thinks his hometown is the only place in the world worth being in. Romeo does not, in these lines, appear to be someone who has seen much of the world. Last, I would quickly like to have a look at something Friar Lawrence says in relation to Prince Aeschylus. In noting how the prince has rushed aside the law in order to give Romeo an alternative punishment, Friar Lawrence makes it clear that Prince Aeschylus really is Verona's ultimate authority figure, because he is able to change or disregard the laws as he sees fit. Romeo then further explains why he thinks that being banished is in fact a cruel punishment rather than a merciful one. When he states that heaven is here, where Juliet lives, it appears that he conflates heaven and Juliet, which draws attention to his feelings of love for her, given that this is an incredibly hyperbolic association to make. Romeo repeats the phrase, "but Romeo may not," twice in this stretch of dialogue, which I think could imply that Romeo is jealous of cats, dogs, mice and flies, which are all ostensibly lesser creatures than him, because they are allowed to be in Verona with Juliet, whereas he is not. This could suggest that Romeo is a jealous or possessive lover. Speaking of repetition, the repetition of banished throughout this short monologue underscores Romeo's distress regarding his punishment, which the audience is now acutely aware relates to his potential separation from his wife. Last, the question with which Romeo closes his speech suggests that he feels particularly betrayed by Friar Lawrence's insistence that banishment isn't all that bad a punishment. This could be Romeo's way of expressing that he does not feel that the friar understands how he is feeling at this point in the play. Despite Romeo's agitation, Friar Lawrence continues to attempt to soothe his worries. This is perhaps best seen in how he offers Romeo some philosophy to provide him with some comfort, whereas the figurative term sweet milk also bears nurturing and pleasant connotations. Moreover, because it is philosophy that Friar Lawrence offers Romeo rather than direct action, for example, we could argue that Friar Lawrence is a stoic, logical character because he turns to reason to combat irrationality. However, Romeo straight up dismisses the friar's offering, which is clear in the exclamation, "Hang up philosophy," which reveals not only that the young Montague is inconsolable, but that he is prone to making powerful emotional outbursts. This impression is reinforced by Romeo's later retort, "Thou canst not speak of that thou dost not feel," because Romeo reminds the friar that he is unable to experience or act upon romantic love, given his religious responsibilities. Throwing this back at the friar when the friar is only trying to help Romeo seems particularly nasty and uncalled for, which again highlights how distressed Romeo feels during this scene. Last, Romeo's summary of the play's events at the end of this short extract brings attention to the play's escalating drama, which is only intensified by the play's relatively short time frame. As Romeo expresses, in the space of a day, he has gotten married, sort of unintentionally murdered his wife's cousin, and has then found out that he has been banished. Things really have escalated quickly. The conversation between Romeo and Friar Lawrence is then repeatedly interrupted by some knocking at Friar Lawrence's door. This heightens the tension in this scene because it disrupts the conversation and suggests that their private discussion may not be so private after all. Knowing that Romeo should not be seen, he has been exiled after all, Friar Lawrence tells him to hide, to which Romeo says that he will be obscured by his heart-sick groans because they will shroud him in a mist-like substance. This presents Romeo as both obstinate and ridiculous, which reinforces the impression that he is so distressed that he cannot comprehend the punishment that has been dealt to him. In other words, he is so shocked that his head has well and truly gone. Now, as the knocking occurs, we see a shift in Friar Lawrence's dialogue, which suddenly contains frequent caesurae, exclamation, and questions. This suggests that the knocking is causing him to panic because Romeo cannot be found in Verona, which only increases the tension of this scene further. This tension, however, lifts when it is revealed to be the nurse who has arrived, sent by Juliet, given that she is regarded as a comic character. When the audience sees that she has turned up, a lot of the tension will dissipate because they understand that she is a relatively unserious and non-threatening character. Once she enters the scene properly, the nurse and Friar Lawrence converse briefly before Romeo interjects. When Friar Lawrence asserts that Romeo is on the ground with his own tears made drunk, Shakespeare may be implying that Friar Lawrence is starting to lose patience with Romeo's emotional outbursts, given that drunkenness is associated with foolish and irrational behaviour, whereas the possessive form of his own suggests that Friar Lawrence thinks that Romeo is solely responsible for his emotional state. Seeing Romeo's emotional irrationality, the nurse attempts to snap him to his senses. She does this when she commands Romeo to be a man for Juliet's sake and stand up. This command particularly sees the nurse call upon gender stereotypes in an attempt to bring Romeo to his senses, which suggests that she upholds traditional values. In other words, by telling Romeo that he should stand up and be a man, we see the nurse attempt to appeal to his masculinity to get him to behave in a different way. After the nurse addresses him, Romeo bombards her with a series of questions but does not wait to hear her response to them. This repetition of questions evidences Romeo's emotional volatility and suggests that he is particularly anxious about Juliet and how she views him following his murder of Tybalt. Romeo and the nurse continue to chat about Juliet's sadness for a bit. The nurse says that the thought of Romeo brings Juliet to tears, as does the thought of Tybalt. Now Romeo does not like the fact that his name makes Juliet sad, which brings him to ask where in his body his name resides so that he may sack the hateful mansion and cut it out of his body. Now Romeo's reference to names recalls Juliet's dialogue from earlier on in the play, what's in a name and so on, which could suggest that love brings people to think and speak in a similar way. The stage direction at the bottom of this mini extract is also worth considering. You see, it highlights the desperation that Romeo feels at this point in the play. By drawing his sword, which he is implied to want to use to maim himself by cutting his name out of his body, we learn that Romeo's emotional volatility has drawn him to violence, and not just any old violence, but self-violence. It is hard to not feel sorry for Romeo at this stage, for it seems that the prospect of being separated from Juliet has put him in a very dark and hopeless place. Upon seeing Romeo draw his sword, Friar Lawrence steps in with a lengthy monologue designed to bring Romeo to his senses once and for all. To begin, Friar Lawrence attacks Romeo's masculinity when he questions whether Romeo is a man and asserts that his tears are womanish. This poses the question: is Friar Lawrence being cruel to be kind when he profoundly challenges Romeo's identity, or is Friar Lawrence instead exhibiting what we might today recognise as being toxic masculinity when he implies that men should not cry? The interpretation you go for will probably depend on whether you like or dislike Friar Lawrence as a character. Next, I would like to have a look at Friar Lawrence's repeated use of questions, which see him construct a thorough argument and affords him a sense of conversational dominance, which together reveal that he is a powerful character. Moreover, his repetition of thy shape, thy love, thy wit, which is itself an example of triadic structure, reveals that Friar Lawrence is a skilled rhetorician, which reinforces the impression that he is a powerful or authoritative character, given that he appears to be quite persuasive. Continuing with Friar Lawrence's monologue, I would like to draw attention to his repetition of "There art thou happy," which he says in relation to Romeo's circumstances and how they aren't actually all that bad. This attempt to console Romeo reminds the audience that although Friar Lawrence appears to be quite stern throughout his monologue, his intentions are actually quite positive. All he wants to do is be kind to Romeo and ease his apparent devastation. And last for this monologue, Friar Lawrence's quick construction of a plan implies that he is either helpful or that he is quite scheming. Again, whether you like Friar Lawrence or not will determine which of these interpretations you are most likely to align with. It is the nurse who first responds to Friar Lawrence's monologue, who says that she could have stayed all night to hear such wisdom be imparted by him. Her subsequent exclamation, "Oh, what learning is!" might suggest that she has not received much of a formal education in her life, given that she marvels at Friar Lawrence's wisdom so much, which is likely because of her lower social status in the play. Of course, by marvelling in such a way, the nurse does also help to create the impression that Friar Lawrence is a wise character. Now the nurse presents Romeo with a ring from Juliet, which prompts him to remark, "How well my comfort is revived by this." This exclamation might bring into question the true cause of Romeo's sadness, because although he seems sad about leaving his hometown behind earlier on in this scene, a gesture that indicates that Juliet is not angry with him perks his mood right up. As such, it seems that Romeo was really only sad about leaving Verona because it meant leaving Juliet behind, and had nothing to do with him leaving behind his hometown and all of his friends and family. Romeo really is quite a single-minded character, isn't he? Last of all, when Friar Lawrence spells out the next few steps of his plan for Romeo, the strong modal verb apparent in I'll creates the impression that Friar Lawrence is a confident, authoritative character. He does not hedge his bets or express uncertainty in his ability to send news to Romeo. Instead, he makes it sound like him sending news to Romeo will absolutely, definitely happen. And that is where the scene ends. With a little over 30 annotations made, I hope you now have a clearer understanding of how Act 3, Scene 3 creates certain impressions about Romeo and Juliet's characters and themes, or how it works formally as a piece of drama. If I have managed to help you out, please do let me know. You could drop this video a like, leave a comment on it, share it around, and you could of course subscribe to my channel too if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have an awesome rest of the day. If you are studying or revising, please remember to take frequent short breaks. As a burned out student is not a happy or successful student, which is what I think you deserve to be.
So Act 3, Scene 3 of Romeo and Juliet makes it pretty clear that Romeo is an emotionally volatile character, whereas it also reveals that Friar Lawrence is kind, authoritative, and potentially quite an interfering character.